The custodian ship, a gleaming vessel the size of a city, hovered in the orbit of Earth's moon. Its form was sleek, almost organic, a symbol of the immense power that lay within the custodian fleet. The human world below went on with business as usual, unaware that their peaceful existence was about to unravel. The custodians had been watching humanity for centuries, observing their progress and growth from a distance. They had long ago deemed Earth's inhabitants harmless. Primitive, yes, but with great potential. Humanity had climbed out of their brutal, fractured history and become a member of the interstellar community. The galaxy had extended a hand, and humanity had grasped it with both hands, eager to explore, to trade, to learn. But in the halls of the Custodian High Council, things were different. Admiral Castor, a towering figure with the sleek skin of his insectoid species, observed the Earth below through the massive viewport of the command center. His sharp mandibles clicked together as he examined the latest reports on human activities. In the past few years, tensions had been rising. Small incidents of aggression between humans and their galactic neighbors. None of these were significant on their own, but together they painted a picture of something troubling. Humanity had always been unpredictable, but this was something else. The last report had come in late last night, buried in a subroutine. It had sent a chill through Xastur's core. There had been an anomaly in the genetic scan. At first, Xastur had dismissed it. It could have been a mistake. Genetic scans didn't always show the full picture. But the more he looked into it, the more his worry grew. Human DNA contained markers, hidden patterns, indicative of a past far older and far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Their biology wasn't simply designed for survival. It was engineered for predation. Admiral, the data from the human genetic analysis is unusual, said Zertha, an analytical officer of the custodian fleet, her voice trembling as she approached Xastur's console. Xastur didn't look at her immediately. His mandibles shifted thoughtfully. What do you mean? Zertha hesitated, then pressed a series of holographic buttons. A map of Earth's history appeared, dotted with milestones of humanity's development. There are genetic sequences hidden deep within their DNA. Neural pathways that, if activated, could trigger extreme aggression. The kind that doesn't just affect one individual, it could turn entire populations. They were engineered to be apex predators. Xastur turned slowly, his many eyes narrowing. Apex predators, he repeated, a hint of disbelief in his tone. You're suggesting that humanity is not just any predator, Zertha interrupted. The kind that once brought an entire galaxy to its knees. Xastur's mind raced. There had been rumors, fragments of old stories about the Stellar Predation War, a war that predated the custodians, fought long before recorded history. The war that had ended in a cataclysm, but no one truly knew who had fought it or why. Some claimed it was a war between ancient galactic powers, but now the pieces were falling into place. This war was about humanity. The custodians had built their empire upon the ashes of that forgotten conflict, but their secrets were beginning to surface. And if Earth's potential was what it seemed, if humanity's past was as dangerous as these reports suggested, it would be only a matter of time before humanity realized the power they held. Xastur's hand hovered over the control panel, then slammed down. The order was clear. Prepare to initiate the containment protocol. We'll conduct a full genetic evaluation on all human leaders. If we do not stop this, the consequences will be catastrophic. And so, the stage was set. The galaxy had no idea what was coming, but humanity was about to be forced into a reckoning with its past, a past that the custodians had desperately hoped to keep buried forever. The Watchers were about to become the hunted. The custodians' fleet orbited Earth with an imposing silence, their sleek ships cutting through the black expanse like shadows. Below, the human world was blissfully unaware of the storm gathering in the stars above. But soon, everything would change. In the heart of Earth's capital, Washington, D.C., President Eleanor Ross sat at her desk, scanning through routine reports when the alert came through. It was a strange communication, encrypted beyond her clearance level, marked urgent. She didn't hesitate to open it. "This is Captain Lai of the Seoul Defense Fleet. We've intercepted an encrypted transmission from the custodians. They're claiming there is a genetic anomaly among humans. They're demanding full access to human DNA archives. I recommend an immediate response. I'll await your orders." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the president staring at the screen, her mind racing. Genetic anomaly. She knew that humanity had been closely monitored by the custodians, but this was different. This wasn't a routine visit or inspection. It was something far more dangerous. She was about to send a response when the door to her office opened. Her chief of staff, Martin Hargrove, entered, his face grim. "Madam President, the custodians have made their move. They've begun enforcing their containment protocol. Several high-ranking officials in the military and genetic sciences are already under lockdown. It's clear they believe something is wrong with us." Ross felt a cold shiver run down her spine. She'd heard the rumors. Whispers of a war from the far past, of humanity's ancient, mysterious origin. It wasn't just a myth, she realized now. It was something real. Something humanity had been kept in the dark about for centuries. Containment. She repeated, standing up. "What the hell are they hiding from us, Martin? What aren't they telling us?" Hargrove hesitated before speaking. "I don't think they'd fully understand what they're dealing with. But we need to act fast. Their agenda is shifting. They're scared of us." Suddenly, an emergency notification flashed across the screen. A classified facility in Nevada had been attacked. Human geneticists who had been researching the custodians' supposed peace treaties with other races were found dead, their bodies exhibiting signs of extreme aggression. Brutality unlike anything humanity had witnessed in a century. Ross's pulse quickened. There was no doubt now. Whatever the custodians had seen in humanity's genetics, it was worse than they feared. It was as though the dormant predator within humanity had begun to stir. Meanwhile, in a remote research lab on the outskirts of Mars, a team of scientists was working feverishly. Dr. Simon Holt, a leading geneticist, had stumbled upon a strange pattern in the human genome that couldn't be explained by conventional science. He had been working alone on the project, studying archived human DNA samples from before the Great Isolation, the time when humanity was first introduced to the galactic fold. In those early days, Earth had been seen as a wild card, a species to be cautiously observed. What Dr. Holt uncovered, however, was far darker. Hidden within humanity's genes was a code, a map to ancient instincts, triggering aggressive behavior when certain environmental factors were present. But it was more than just violence. It was a deep primal call to conquer. Holt's fingers hovered over the keyboard. The data was undeniable. He had broken through the genetic barrier. Humans were not just survivors. They were designed to be apex predators. As he began to run simulations, the lab's security systems suddenly engaged. The alarms blared. Holt turned in shock to see two figures, military personnel, standing in the doorway. "Dr. Holt, you need to come with us. The custodians have given their orders," one of them said coldly. "Orders? What orders?" Holt asked, his voice shaking. "They want you to come with us, now. Containment protocol is in effect." But Holt's eyes narrowed. He wasn't going to be contained. Not anymore. The secrets of humanity's origins were about to be revealed, and if the custodians thought they could control the truth, they were gravely mistaken. Holt grabbed his data drive, slammed it into his pocket, and bolted for the emergency exit. There was no turning back now. The storm was coming. In the weeks that followed, tension between humanity and the custodians escalated to a boiling point. Earth's governments, once proud members of the Galactic Peacekeeping Alliance, now found themselves under siege, not by weapons, but by secrets. The custodians had insisted on immediate compliance with their genetic evaluation demands, And when humanity refused, diplomatic lines were shattered. The human colonies across the galaxy began to experience strange disruptions, gravitational anomalies near the fringes of human-held space, communications blackouts that lasted for hours. The atmosphere was thick with suspicion. Something had changed. Something deep within humanity's genetic code had been activated. In the corridors of the UN Assembly, President Eleanor Ross sat before a gathered council of Earth's most powerful leaders. The room buzzed with nervous chatter, but Ross remained silent, her mind grappling with the implications of the situation. She had just received reports of widespread unexplained violence erupting on colonies, from Mars to Alpha Centauri. It was as though the human population was undergoing a massive genetic shift, an awakening that was not only shocking in its intensity but disturbing in its nature. "We need to take action," Ross said, her voice cutting through the tension. "The custodians are moving in. Unsure of it, we're not just being monitored anymore. They see us as a threat." General Daniel Kane, commander of Earth's military forces, nodded solemnly. "We've been preparing for this. Our fleets are on standby. But there's something we need to address, Madam President. These incidents, these violent outbreaks, we don't have control over them. Humans are suddenly becoming unpredictable." "You think this is part of their plan?" Ross asked, eyes narrowing. "No," Kane said, his voice heavy. "I think we've underestimated what's inside us. We didn't know it, but something is triggered in our genes. It's as if we were always meant to be this way. Hunters." The unrest wasn't limited to Earth. Across the galaxy, reports of human aggression were mounting. On Astronine, a research station on the edge of a gas giant, a human-led crew had gone rogue. They weren't just resisting orders from the custodians. They were actively attacking any custodian outpost in their vicinity. They had no clear strategy, no formal chain of command. Yet their attacks were precise, brutal, and overwhelming. The Astronine incident was just one of many. Human freedom fighters, once dismissed as fringe radicals, now seemed to be everywhere, striking swiftly and without warning. The custodians, whose military force had always been considered nearly unbeatable, were outclassed in asymmetrical combat by humans with no formal training. Humans didn't fight like soldiers. They fought like animals, with an edge, unpredictable and wild. On the custodian flagship, Exaster stared at the flashing screens, which displayed the chaos unfolding across human space. His worst fears were becoming reality. He had suspected this shift was possible, but he hadn't anticipated it happening so suddenly, or with such intensity. "Admiral, the human resistance is spreading," Zertha reported, her voice grim. "And they're learning too fast. They don't fight with the same tactics, but they adapt rapidly. We've lost several high-value targets. I've never seen anything like it. Their warriors fight like predators." Zaster slammed his fist on the table, sending holographic data spiraling across the command center. "We were fools. The ancient texts warned us about this. We thought we could control them, keep them contained. We never accounted for the awakening. They were engineered to be warriors." Back on Earth, President Ross watched as a video feed from the Sol Defense Fleet flashed across her screen. A custodian warship, the Valiant, had just engaged in a brutal firefight with a human flotilla near the asteroid belt. The custodians had underestimated the humans again. Human ships, modified for close-quarters combat, had clawed their way into the heart of the custodian fleet, using bizarre, primitive tactics that threw the custodians' advanced tech into disarray. The humans were making their stand in a place no one expected, the void of space itself. No one knew how they'd done it. But the battle was over. The custodians had retreated, and Earth's message was clear. Humanity was no longer their pawn. But the battle for freedom was just beginning. The custodians would not back down easily. They had seen what humanity was capable of, and they had one last card to play, a final, devastating strike. But the humans weren't afraid. They had been given a gift, something ancient, something far beyond their comprehension. And now, humanity would prove it. They would not be prey. The reckoning had only just begun. The tide had shifted. What began as isolated incidents of rebellion had now transformed into something far more dangerous, a full-scale uprising. Human forces, once scattered and disorganized, were now united under a single banner: freedom from the Custodians' control. And the Custodians, once the galaxy's uncontested peacekeepers, now found themselves embroiled in an unexpected war, one they had no clear understanding of. In the heart of the Sol Defense Fleet, Admiral James Callahan surveyed the holographic battle maps of the conflict raging across the galaxy. The Custodians were formidable, but humanity was not fighting the war they expected. Human tactics were unorthodox, unpredictable. Ships equipped with state-of-the-art weapons and technology were being torn apart by close-quarters combat, ambushes, and guerrilla strikes. It wasn't just technology that was driving this war. It was instinct, something deep and primal embedded in humanity's very DNA. Callahan's mind drifted back to the first moments of the conflict. The human fleet had barely scratched the surface of the Custodian armada when an unexpected assault had hit, a suicide strike by a small group of human pilots, driving their ships into Custodian command vessels, causing catastrophic damage. It wasn't strategic, it was desperate, but it worked, and the Custodians were forced to adapt, and quickly. But humanity's advantage was clear. They didn't need to think like soldiers. They didn't have to follow a playbook. They could simply react. "This isn't a war," Callahan muttered to himself, rubbing his temple. "This is a hunt." On the distant moon of Astra 4, a strike team led by Colonel Sarah Timmons moved through the dense, fog-laden forest. The Custodians had established a strategic outpost there, but now, humanity had learned to strike where the Custodians least expected. The ground was silent, save for the faint sound of the team's breath and the distant hum of a Custodian defense network. Timmons' eyes glinted with the same intensity that had led her through countless operations. Her team was outfitted with cutting-edge stealth technology, but it wasn't just the tech that made them deadly. It was their human instincts, their ability to sense danger, to adapt in real time, to hunt. "We're in position," Timmons whispered into her communicator, her voice low but steady. "The objective is clear. We take out their command center, and we're out in under 5 minutes. Stay sharp." Her team moved forward, each member a well-honed predator, their training pushing them to work as seamlessly as a pack. In the shadows, they could hear the Custodian sentries moving, but they couldn't see them. Not yet. The humans moved like phantoms, anticipating every movement, every sound, and before the Custodians could react, the humans struck. A dozen Custodian soldiers fell without ever seeing their attackers. The raid was over before the Custodians even knew they were under attack. In the skies above, Cayaster paced nervously in the command center of the Valiant, a Custodian warship flagship. Reports of human tactical brilliance were beginning to overwhelm the Custodian High Command. Hester's own fleet had been decimated by these primitive attacks, and the question that gnawed at him now was whether the Custodians had underestimated humanity's true potential. "They adapt too quickly, Admiral," Zertha said, her voice tinged with frustration. "We are dealing with more than a species of survivors. They are born hunters, engineered for combat. Every battle they face, they learn from it. Our superiority is fading." Zastur's mandibles clicked together as he steeled himself. "No, it's more than that. It's instinct, Zertha. They've unlocked something within themselves, something ancient." "We've made a mistake," Zertha said, voice dropping to a near whisper. "Humanity was never meant to be this docile, this easy to control. They are not simply our equals in the field. They are our predators." Zastur clenched his fists. The Custodians had once been the apex, the rulers of the galaxy, keeping the peace through sheer might. But now, they faced something far more dangerous than mere rebellion. Humanity was not just fighting for survival. They were fighting for dominance, and they were winning. "We need to consider our next move carefully," Castor said, his voice low. "They are evolving. And if they continue at this rate, we will no longer be the ones controlling this galaxy." Back on Earth, President Ross sat in the quiet of her war room, studying the holographic map that displayed the front lines of the conflict. The custodian's hold on the galaxy was slipping, and humanity had only just begun to tap into its true potential. But Ross knew that this new predatory instinct was not without consequences. The line between self-defense and conquest was quickly blurring. Humanity was awakening, but the question remained: could they control their newfound power, or would they fall into the same traps that had led their ancestors to the brink of destruction? Ross stood up, the weight of that decision heavy on her shoulders. "Prepare for the final phase of operations," she said. "The custodians may think they're still in control, but it's time they learned the truth." Humanity would no longer hide in the shadows of their past. They were reclaiming the stars, and the custodians would have to face the full force of humanity's awakening. The final push had begun. President Eleanor Ross sat in the dimly lit war room, her gaze fixed on the central holographic map. Earth's space fleet, bolstered by newly liberated colonies and rogue factions of military leaders, was poised for a decisive strike. But even as they prepared for the final offensive, the looming question remained: could humanity control the monster they had awoken within themselves, or would they become the very thing they had once feared? Ross could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her. The custodians, with all their might, had underestimated the depths of human nature. They had thought of humanity as primitive, nothing more than a species of scavengers and laborers. But that had been a lie, one buried beneath centuries of manipulation. The truth had emerged, and now it was humanity's turn to write its own fate. The custodians' fleet was divided, fractured in ways no one had ever predicted. The strike on Astrophore had crippled their command center, and the human raiders had gained access to their most closely guarded secrets. The ancient genetic data, hidden in the custodian archives for millennia, was now in human hands, and it revealed a shocking truth. Humanity was not simply a byproduct of evolution, but the product of deliberate genetic engineering. A galactic predator designed to thrive in the chaos of war and conquest. "Madam President," General Daniel Kane spoke up, his voice grave. "We're ready. Our fleets are in position. The custodians won't be able to stop us this time." Ross nodded, but her mind lingered on the consequences. The custodians had pushed humanity to the edge, but now that edge was becoming a weapon. They had armed humanity with knowledge, with power, and they had no idea what kind of beast they had unleashed. In the depths of custodian space, Admiral Castor watched the incoming human fleet approach. The battle-hardened custodian commander knew the odds were stacked against him. Every engagement with humanity's forces had shown that the humans were adapting faster than their enemies could anticipate. And the most terrifying part was that they didn't need technology to win. Their instincts, the ancient predator instincts buried deep in their DNA, were far more dangerous than any fleet or weapon. The latest intelligence report painted a grim picture. Humanity was no longer just fighting for survival. They were hunting. "We underestimated them," Hagtastor muttered to himself, his many eyes narrowing as he surveyed the stars beyond. "They are not just a species to control. They are a force we cannot contain." Zertha, his advisor, stood at his side, her expression grim. "It's worse than we thought, Admiral. They're organizing. They've taken the genetic data, and now they know the truth. They understand what they are, and they're using it against us." Castor clenched his fists, his mandibles grinding in frustration. "If they truly know what they are, then they will stop at nothing to destroy us. We can't allow that. We must strike first." The Sol Defense Fleet was mobilizing, every ship in the fleet now a beacon of humanity's will to survive. The Stellar Conqueror, the flagship under Admiral Callahan's command, was a symbol of this new humanity. Its weapons were as advanced as any custodian technology, but it was more than that. It was a statement, a declaration that humanity would no longer be controlled. In the hangars below deck, Colonel Sarah Timmons stood with her squad, preparing for the final mission. She wasn't just a soldier anymore. She was part of something larger, something more primal. The custodians had failed to understand that. They thought humanity was simply a species that could be programmed, manipulated, and contained. But now Timmons understood the truth. Humans were not just survivors. They were hunters, born to conquer. And that knowledge had given them the strength to rise. "We're going after their command ship," Timmons said, her voice steady. "We don't leave anything standing. The war ends now." Her team nodded in unison, each member a reflection of the raw power humanity had unleashed. Their eyes burned with the intensity of the fight ahead. This wasn't just a mission. It was a reckoning. As the human fleet moved toward the heart of custodian space, President Ross addressed the United Governments of Earth. Her voice resonated across the communication channels, heard by billions of humans on every corner of the planet. "Today, we stand at the edge of a new era. The custodians have kept us in the dark for too long, manipulated us with lies, and controlled our future. But no more. We now know the truth of who we are, of what we are capable of, and we will not back down." The message was broadcast on every frequency, every channel. It was humanity's final challenge to the custodians, and their first true step toward freedom. In the vast expanse of space, the final confrontation was imminent. The custodians' once unassailable fleet was now under siege, outmatched by a new humanity, one that had awoken to its full potential. The battle for the stars had begun, and there would be no turning back. The hunter was now the hunted. The galaxy was holding its breath as humanity's fleets surged toward the heart of custodian space. The final battle was upon them. The custodians, the self-proclaimed peacekeepers and the galaxy's rulers, were about to face an unprecedented force. They had spent millennia controlling the stars, keeping humanity in check, hiding the truth of humanity's origins. Now, the truth had come to light, and humanity was poised to reclaim what was rightfully theirs. Admiral Castor stood on the bridge of the flagship Valiant, staring at the incoming human fleet. He could feel the shift in the air, the tension that threatened to snap at any moment. His once flawless tactical strategies had failed time and again. The humans were relentless, their new tactics impossible to predict. And now, they were coming for him, coming for all of them. "We can no longer afford to underestimate them," Admiral Zertha said, her voice tight with frustration. "Their technology is on par with ours, but it's their instincts that have thrown everything into disarray. They don't fight like soldiers. They fight like predators." Castor turned, his mandibles clicking in thought. "We cannot let them reach the core. If they do, everything will unravel. We have to strike first." "But, Admiral," Zertha began, but she was cut off by a sharp tone in his voice. "No," Castor replied. "We can't react anymore. We must take the initiative, or we'll be swept aside. Prepare the fleet. We strike before they reach our heart." The human fleets, led by Admiral Callahan, were moving in with unmatched precision. What the custodians didn't understand was that humanity had stopped being merely reactive. No longer were they simply fighting to survive. They had embraced their predatory nature. They were now on the offensive, and they were armed with something more dangerous than weapons: the truth. Admiral Callahan stood at the command center of the Stellar Conqueror, watching as the vast expanse of space opened before him. "This is it," he muttered to himself, his hand resting on the cold surface of the command table. "We push forward. No retreat. No surrender." "Admiral," came the voice of Colonel Timmons, her expression fierce as she entered the command room. "All strike teams are in position. The custodians won't know what hit them." Callahan nodded, his steely gaze fixed on the projection of the custodian fleet. "They won't. And this time, it's not just about winning the battle. It's about showing them who we really are. As the human fleet closed in, the first shots were fired. A blinding array of energy beams, illuminating the void. The custodian fleet responded with precision, their shields holding for the moment, but the humans were relentless, undeterred by the weight of the fight ahead. They adapted, exploiting every opening, taking advantage of every weakness. The battle was unlike anything the custodians had ever faced. Humanity's ships darted between asteroids, using the debris to mask their movements, attacking with pinpoint accuracy. The custodians had relied on overwhelming force, expecting humans to fight with conventional methods, but humans were too unpredictable. They didn't fight as a collective. They fought as individuals, instinctively aware of their surroundings and how to exploit every advantage. The Stellar Conqueror led the charge, breaking through the custodian defenses like a beast of legend, with Callahan at the helm. His fleet flanked the custodians, cutting off their retreat and forcing them into a corner. The custodian command ships, which had once seemed invincible, were now struggling to maintain control. "We're through their lines, Admiral," Timmons reported, her voice tight with the intensity of the fight. "Their defenses are crumbling." Callahan allowed himself a moment of grim satisfaction. "Keep pushing. We have to take their core." Deep within the heart of the custodian flagship, Admiral Castor paced in the command center, his crew in full panic. The Valiant's shields were beginning to fail, the relentless human onslaught wearing them down. His fleet was breaking apart, and they were running out of time. "We cannot win this," Zertha said quietly, her eyes flicking nervously between the chaotic displays of battle. They've figured us out." Zastur's expression hardened. "We cannot lose. Prepare for a final strike. Activate the hypercharge cannons. We'll take the fight to them, head on." But as he gave the order, a cold dread swept over him. He had underestimated the humans, thought them nothing more than a species to be manipulated and controlled. But he was wrong. Humanity was not to be controlled. They were to be reckoned with. The final moments of the battle came swiftly. In the depths of space, human and custodian forces clashed in a chaotic dance of light and death. The Valiant was surrounded. The Stellar Conqueror delivered the final blow, a volley of concentrated fire that pierced through the heart of the custodian flagship, ending the battle in a flash of brilliant light. As the dust settled, the humans stood victorious, but the cost was heavy. The custodians had been toppled, but the war was far from over. Humanity had just reclaimed their destiny, but the question now was, what would they do with it? Would they rise as the new rulers of the stars, or would the same instincts that had brought them to victory drive them into something darker? The answers lay ahead. The aftermath of the battle at Custodian's Core was nothing short of a reckoning. Humanity had not only defeated the Custodians, they had reclaimed the stars. The once unassailable empire of the Custodians was now reduced to a shattered remnant, struggling to rebuild amidst the cosmic ruins left behind. But while the Custodians licked their wounds, humanity stood at the precipice of an entirely new era. In the hushed silence of Earth's war room, President Eleanor Ross stared at the live transmission of the destroyed Custodian fleet. Their last defensive line had fallen, their core world reduced to rubble. There was no going back now. The Custodians had been toppled. The galaxy was open. It was humanity's time to take control, but at what cost? "We've done it." Her voice was quiet, yet every word echoed with the weight of 1,000 decisions. The room, filled with military advisors and political leaders, remained silent, each one processing the enormity of the victory. "Madam President," General Kane spoke up, his tone cautious. "The Custodians are finished, but they won't fade quietly. We've heard rumors, fragments of intelligence. Some Custodian factions are already mobilizing for a counteroffensive." Ross's brow furrowed. "How?" "Their fleets are decimated." "Not all their fleets, Madam President," Kane replied. "We've intercepted comms indicating a final gambit. They plan to activate a superweapon, something we've never encountered." If that happens, all our victories will be for nothing." Ross clenched her fists, the weight of command pressing down harder than ever. The custodians were done, but they were not yet defeated. Their thirst for control had been their downfall, but if they could somehow summon one last strike, they might change everything. "We can't allow it," she said firmly. "We move forward with the final push. If the custodians still have a card to play, we'll take it from them." Far across the galaxy, Colonel Sarah Timmons and her strike teams were the spearhead of humanity's counteroffensive. The Valiant, the custodians' flagship, had been reduced to nothing more than debris. But that hadn't stopped the custodians from rallying whatever resources they could scrape together. Timmons knew there were remnants of their forces hiding in the dark corners of space, gathering strength for one final desperate act. Her eyes scanned the star maps. The custodians weren't just hiding. They were reorganizing. And they were bringing something worse than soldiers. They were bringing an army of their own creations, beings engineered with terrifying capabilities, meant to reshape the galaxy. Super soldiers, designed for one purpose: to reclaim the stars from humanity's grasp. "We can't let them rebuild," Timmons said to her squad, determination in her voice. "If they unleash those creations, we'll be fighting an enemy we don't even understand. We need to strike now, hit them before they can gather their forces." Her team nodded, their eyes fierce with resolve. Humanity had won battles, but the war was far from over. In the hushed depths of custodian space, Predatory stood before the remnants of his people. His forces had been shattered, and their homeworld was little more than a graveyard. But the custodians had always had one final card to play: the Predators. It was a last resort, a desperation move. The custodians had long perfected the art of genetic manipulation, creating beings designed not just for battle, but for dominance. The Predators were born from the darkest depths of custodian engineering, infused with the same ancient instincts that humanity had recently awakened. They were the perfect soldiers, faster, stronger, and more lethal than anything the custodians had ever produced. "We cannot allow the humans to claim everything," Predatory muttered, staring out into the cold vacuum of space. "We created them to be the perfect weapon. It is time they fulfill their purpose." He activated the protocol, sending the final signal to the hidden custodian laboratories. The Predators would be unleashed. On Earth, President Ross paced as her advisors worked to track the custodians' final moves. The battle had shifted beyond anything they had anticipated. The custodian's superweapon was not a single device. It was a living force, a new breed of soldier engineered to hunt, to kill, and to destroy. The Predators were now coming for them. "We have to fight fire with fire," General Kane said, his voice grim. "The custodians may have designed the Predators to be the apex, but we're human. We've survived the wild. We've thrived in the most extreme environments. We have something they don't." "Instinct," Ross whispered, a realization dawning on her. "We've unlocked the hunter inside of us. Now we have to use it." As the final battle loomed, humanity faced its greatest challenge yet. The custodians had created their perfect weapon, but humanity had something they hadn't anticipated: a will to survive and conquer that was ancient and uncontrollable. The Predators would rise, but so would humanity. And now, the true test began: which species would emerge as the true apex predator of the galaxy? The final chapter was being written, and in the end, only one would be left standing. The final battle had begun. Humanity had survived countless trials, but this was something entirely different. The Predators, the last remnants of the custodians' genetic mastery, had been unleashed from the shadows of deep space. These engineered beings were faster, stronger, and far more deadly than any soldier the custodians had ever fielded. They were predators in every sense, born to hunt and kill without hesitation, but they were not prepared for what awaited them. Colonel Sarah Timmons and her team were among the first to encounter the Predators. Their initial reconnaissance had shown nothing unusual, just the cold void of space, devoid of movement. But then, As they neared the dark sector where the custodians' final bastions were hidden, the silence shattered. A screech, a primal cry, echoed across the comms. It was the sound of a predator, an apex hunter, signaling the start of the hunt. Timmins gritted her teeth, her pulse quickening. These were no ordinary enemies, but they were not invincible. She'd seen the same bloodlust, the same hunger in her own species. And now it was time to turn the tables. "Engage them," she commanded, her voice cold and focused. "Remember, they're not just soldiers, they're killers. But so are we." The team sprang into action, their advanced training kicking in as they adapted to the new breed of enemy. The predators were fast, darting through the shadows of asteroids and debris, their eyes glowing with the bloodlust of their creators. But the humans were just as relentless. They weren't just fighting for survival, they were fighting for control of the future. Every action, every movement, was executed with predatory precision. As the battle raged on, Timmins and her squad found themselves face to face with the Predator Alpha, a creature towering over them with spiked armor and a terrifying array of lethal weaponry. The Predator Alpha was a nightmare, every movement exuding pure killing instinct. But Timmins wasn't afraid. Her team wasn't afraid. Because they had learned something that the custodians had failed to understand. Humanity's true strength was in their adaptability. They were not just fighters. They were survivors. And they were predators too. "Now," Timmins yelled, and the team launched a coordinated assault. The Predator Alpha charged with lightning speed, but the humans had already anticipated its moves. The fight was brutal, fast, and brutal. Sparks flew as plasma rounds and energy blades clashed against the creature's armor. Timmins' team worked in perfect unison, using every ounce of their instincts to bring down the beast. And they did. With a final strike, the Predator Alpha crumpled to the ground, a flash of primal victory echoing through the ship. The humans had won their first battle against the ultimate creation of the custodians, but the war was far from over. Across the galaxy, President Ross stood at the helm of the Stellar Conqueror, her fingers pressing against the cold metal of the command console. The custodians were broken, but the predators were relentless. Humanity had to keep pushing, keep fighting. The fate of the galaxy was at stake. "General Kane," Ross said, her voice steady but filled with determination. "We've seen what the predators can do, but we know their limits. They were made to hunt, but we were born to conquer." Kane nodded, his eyes reflecting the same fierce resolve. "We've got one shot, Madam President. We destroy their breeding grounds, cut off their source, and they'll fall. It's now or never." Ross nodded, her mind sharp. "Then let's make sure we're the ones standing when it's over. Humanity won't just survive this. We will rise from the ashes and take control of the stars." The final assault was underway. The human fleets converged on the Predator breeding facility, a dark and impenetrable fortress nestled in the heart of a forgotten system. It was a race against time. If the humans didn't destroy it, the predators would overwhelm them. But the humans had learned from their past mistakes. They didn't charge in blindly. They worked in the shadows, hunting just as their enemies had. The predator forces were fierce, but they lacked the cunning and adaptability that humanity had mastered. In a decisive, coordinated strike, humanity launched an all-out assault on the facility. Ground teams infiltrated, disabling defenses, while the fleet above rained destruction down upon the facility. The predators fought back with all their might, but the humans were relentless. And then it was over. The predator breeding facility lay in ruins, and with it, the last hope of the custodians to reclaim control over the galaxy. Humanity had not just won, they had conquered. In the silent aftermath, the galaxy stood at the dawn of a new age. The custodians had fallen, the predators had been defeated, and humanity had proven what they had always known deep inside. They were meant to rule.